Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It depends on where you're listening, and welcome to The Solution. Nothing changes if we change nothing. Hey, Chevar.
How are you, Ronnie? How's it been?
It's been real, man, very busy, and very hot. I don't like this hot weather. It's just not me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a summer baby just like you, and my birthday's coming up. I mean, I do love the summer, but I don't like the heat.
Yeah.
I don't like the heat at all.
And now we have this storm barreling down the East Coast. I almost said the West Coast. I'm in my different location in my mind. So I'm always a little nervous about that, but hopefully we won't get hit too badly.
Right. I mean, thank you for letting me know, because I don't watch the news anymore or even television. I've been listening to more podcasts. So, I mean, they don't do the weather on podcasts, ironically. Well, not ironically, why would they do the weather? Because then if I listen to it 3 months later, the weather will be over. So thank you for letting me know that there's some sort of a storm. Luckily, I'm already prepared. Like, I have my batteries, I have everything. I'm already prepared to address this incoming storm. Hopefully.
Good.
I don't go outside. I was going to say, hopefully I don't go outside. I don't go outside. I stay in my house.
Well, I go in my backyard and take my dogs out. And by the way, if you see me turn around, you'll know it's because I have a dog who's misbehaving. So I apologize in advance. You get the real deal here with us in our homes. You get the sounds of the city with Chevar, and you get
Absolutely.
the sounds of the suburbs with me.
It's all about New York. It's all about New York. The city's so nice, they named it twice. I love that saying.
That is a great saying. New York's a very special place. I left it for 17 years of my life and came back 6 years ago, and I don't regret it for a second. I had to come home.
It is great. It is great. One of the things I do want us to talk about, let's talk about what we've been up to this past week. Last week, we dropped an episode on YouTube, so go watch our YouTube channel with our CPCs, the colleges who we work with. We also were at CATCA.
We were,
and we did a workshop on podcasting. And how do you feel? How do you feel about that?
I really enjoyed it. Even though we're still learning the ropes here with our podcast together, you're by no means new to podcasting, and I felt like we really had something to share and offer, and the people were so into it.
Absolutely,
oh my God,
absolutely. I wish we were able to see their faces. I wish we were able to have breakout rooms like this platform.
Yes.
I felt it was great, but I also felt that the loss of the connection with the people. So it was almost like a podcast in itself. That we were talking to each other and responding to comments like it was a podcast.
Exactly. That was what was so weird about it. We thought, we thought we were going to have like a Zoom type of platform, and we were kind of surprised when we didn't. But we made it work.
Absolutely. I mean, everyone loved it. People, the comments in there, the responses, people sharing feedback, people asking questions, people even asking, could they be on our show?
I've got actually somebody who emailed me a few times already, so I'm going to get in touch with him and see, what he's about, and hopefully we'll have him on our show. But yeah, people were just really open to it, and hopefully we're going to see the birth of a whole bunch of new podcasts on prevention.
I agree, and we did talk about, someone brought up an action about DFC funded coalitions to their podcast, and that was a good question that wow, I don't know. And hopefully we get some from there, from our workshop that, people do say, this is our opportunity to hit a group or a category that hasn't been touched or barely touched. Because I don't know of any.
Exactly. I mean, podcasting in prevention is pretty much unheard of. We found a few, but I didn't find a lot of groups that were doing it. So I think it's kind of fun and kind of cool.
So one other thing that I've noticed, I'm not sure if I mentioned this in the previous podcast, we did talk about this, about the alcohol to go. We have hinted at, but this part I noticed that I went out with a group of, we went bike riding, and we went to this place in Brooklyn, and now you have, because it's contactless, so you scan the code and you put your order in. But you can't buy any drinks via this through the app, through the online menu. They only have to see your face. So now they've been addressing that, and so you can't even buy soda, like you can't even buy juice. Like all the beverages are eliminated to take away from any confusion. So you order your food, and there's a separate line to order any type of beverage, whether it's water, juice, or an alcoholic beverage. They have to see your face, so they'll if you try to order a beverage, they'll cancel that order.
Well, that's good, because we were really concerned about people drinking too much, people, underage drinkers, being able to order easily, ordering a cookie and getting whatever alcohol they wanted. So we needed to take some measures to, prevent that from happening. So I'm glad to hear that. And I know New York State has signed some policies into existence that are trying to limit that practice as well. So I guess everybody talking about it hasn't hurt.
No, it's a great move. And me seeing it in action, because like I saw the alcohol to go in action when people were just buying alcohol and drinking. I even seen them in the news. People joked about, like you said, buying a cookie and getting a bottle of whatever. But the fact that our governor said he doesn't want that to happen, because he's even noticed that people were just buying napkins and getting a drink. No, you have to get a meal. That's what he says. You have to get a meal. You're not just going to give people alcohol and have them stand outside and get drunk and do whatever. Granted, that's your right to be an adult and live your life, but it's also conditions of life, how you affect people around you. And that's what he chose, and he wants our state and city to do and fall under. And seeing that, participating in that, and I'm like, I just want some juice. I'm like, I gotta go through this to get a passion fruit smoothie. Like,
well, I mean, you're one of those adults who really doesn't drink, so
I'm like, whatever. So okay, I'm like, but I took it as a plus for me. I took it as, what, they're trying to prevent, because like you can't, after someone purchases it, you can't tell them no. Like, in order to get your money back, it's a hassle. So it's like, so we don't allow you to order drinks, which is cool, and I think is a big thing. I know it's a big thing for me, at least, especially seeing, like I stated in previous episodes, seeing young people, having more access to. So but yeah.
Well, with all that time on their hands, and the whole thing with school being virtual for so long, and now the summer activities have been really limited. They were first cut completely, and then a few were restored, but there's not a lot to do for a young person right now, especially with physical distancing and just not being able to be in the presence of their friends in the same way. Unfortunately, there are those that violate that, but I can't imagine what it would be like to be a young person during the summer of 2020.
No, definitely. I myself, luckily my children, they don't really go outside. I used to encourage them to go outside and have fun, but now it's like, please stay home. But luckily, like they choose to stay home. And I also wonder, like, how would I navigate this when I was a teenager? Especially being, living in the city and having 24-hour access to things. Like, what would how would I function in today's society? We had things to do. Even if we didn't, we did something. Like, now it's like you can go outside, but the light, you putting yourself at risk. Like, would I put myself at risk? And I think about that.
And your family.
Yeah. Would I bring that home to my brother when I was younger? My brother's a serious chronic asthmatic. Would I bring that home to my mom? Or to any family member? I knowing myself, I probably wouldn't, because I've always made the decision not to.
Shavar, I hate to interrupt you, but it looks like we have a guest at our door.
Every single time.
You always make that. I'm not going to even comment on that.
Always happens to me.
But I'm always excited. Here's our guest today, Kaity. Hey.
Hey, it's Kaity, one of the coolest people in the world. You're super dope. I'm going to stop talking, because it would be great if you introduce yourself and tell our listeners who you are and what you do.
Yeah, I'm Kaity Lloyd-Styles, and I work in prevention in New York City, in the prevention world. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a really rich prevention community, and it's been so much fun because every week one of our community partners comes on and talks with us. And you've certainly been one who's really helped us with a lot of our campaigns and understandings. And I mean, just the ideas around microaggressions and the Black trans community. I mean, these have been focuses of our New York City Pop campaign for a while. And we thought today, talk about whatever you feel like talking about, but also maybe talk about that because it's so important. And people very often just don't know about it. I've been reading again, there's a couple of more deaths in the Black trans community. More Black trans women were murdered over the last week or two.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I heard a number, I think it was 28 trans people have been killed this year. Most of them are Black trans women. Yeah.
Oh, it's just insane.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here with you guys. Yeah. So Pop NYC Pop. I always do that backwards. You guys are awesome. And I really enjoy being a part of you. And thank you for letting me come with my big mouth, always saying things. I really appreciate it. And I think we make really great, awesome, powerful posts. So I work in prevention, primarily around LGBTQ prevention, preventing substance misuse among the queer communities. In general, queer youth use substances at rates 2 and 3 times higher than their straight counterparts, and then that number is even higher for trans youth. And I mean, this is really a product of just discrimination, right? And so then you add layers on top of layers of things. So if you're trans, then you have, transphobia. If you're not white, then you have racism added onto that. So we really just see the systematic impact all of these things have. And then for me, I mean, I think I try to talk about sort of the epidemic of murder with trans Black women a lot because we don't talk about it in society. So we don't even have, as a nation, an idea of how many trans people live in the US because we don't collect that data. We don't know it. And so then you have a population that's already forced underground, that's hidden, and then is experiencing these very high amounts of very high murder rates. That is a product of transphobia in our society. And of people not talking about it, right? And so I'm not trans, I'm white. And so it's my job to talk about that and to sort of educate my community and the people that I know to sort of say hey, all the little things you do, when you give someone a weird look in a bathroom or kind of question someone, all of that goes somewhere and is adding to trauma for someone.
Yeah, and people really don't get that. People don't get that too. That just that double take that somebody does, or that staring, or just a comment, oh, you really do look like a woman. People don't get that, and that's the other topic we want to talk about too: microaggressions, because these play on people's mental health issues, and they create a lot of trauma, and that leads to substance misuse. It leads to other mental health issues, and we thought we need to shine a light on that. So we, definitely hoping to continue the discussion about that today. Because people don't know. Oh.
I personally would like to thank you guys on educating me on a lot of this information. Ronni, you sitting with me. Kaity, one of our first conversations we had, you sat down and because I have questions. I always have questions because I want to do my best as an ally. And like you said earlier, you aren't trans. All of you guys, myself included, we want to know how to support and how to help. I think that's the most important part, whether it's supporting someone, a person of color, supporting someone who's a part of the LGBT community, supporting anyone. What does that look like? If you can help define what that looks like, especially in your work, what would that look like? Especially and also in drug prevention.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that looks like representation in jobs, right? So part of it is we don't see trans people very often outside of sort of what our stereotypical roles are. When someone's in a show or on TV, it's still in part of it. And there's like Pose is a great show. They're very incredible, powerful shows. I'm not like trying to take anyone down with that. But representation in not just media, but like every day. Like when I go to the grocery store, it should be everyone who's like a manager, a clerk, like in office buildings, doctors. Like we need representation from people across like the entire diversity spectrum, right? So we need cis Black doctors, we need trans Black doctors, you know, Latinx folks, Asian folks, like everyone. The problem is we have a society that so many positions of power, you go somewhere and it's a white person there, and it's usually like a cis white person and usually a straight white person. And so there's all of these barriers set up, and it, you know, I think where we are now in 2020 is we're starting to talk about race and kind of white privilege and recognizing your own privilege, which I feel like every day there's something I think of and I'm like, right, yeah, that's like another way I've exercised privilege without ever thinking about that and realizing no one's going to check me on that. Yeah, like we need to like get people jobs and employment, and that also goes into substance misuse, right? So like people need jobs and education to help prevent like not using substances, to help buffer against some of that trauma, to build resiliency. And the way you get inspired to see jobs is you see people like you in that position. So
right, exactly.
So you mentioned like I love talking to people. I love talking to you guys, like, you know, and I like listening because you mentioned something about, you know, well, you kind of indirectly about educating. Like, what does educating people look like? Like, do we have that in schools? Do we have more shows? Do we have more open forums? What does that look like?
yeah, I mean, in terms of LGBT history, so that's something that's new. All right, pre-pandemic, it was new that City Council passed that LGBTQ history needed to be included in history class, right? So we need that. We need history about civil rights across racial lines, you know, and sort of understanding a more nuanced history of this country. It wasn't like this great white guy Columbus came over and, you know, and then I feel like you get to high school and you learn a little bit. It wasn't quite so clean, and like, you know, you dive into these things, and then if you like are able to go to college, you maybe have a course or two in that, but it's not from day one. We need to be talking about systems of oppression and teaching young people how to recognize that, but how to break out of it. And then, you know, that also comes with sort of, I'm all over the place, sorry.
No, you're right, totally fine. You're totally fine.
Yeah.
I feel like that also comes though with economic empowerment, right? And really having opportunities for everyone to have equal access to a job, to a high-paying, high-position job.
Well, we were together this morning. We were talking, well, virtually together, talking about a lot of that stuff. I mean, one of the things I remember a few years ago when I went to CADCA, I've been to CADCA a bunch of times, and I went to a workshop on developing urban coalitions. And it was a coalition based right in Washington, D.C. And there were, I think, 3 or 4 women up there who were the speakers. And the first thing they said was, people can't think about drug prevention when they can't put food on the table, or they don't have a safe place to live, or they don't have a job, you know, when they're working 2 and 3 jobs to support their family. If we don't deal with the basic needs, how do we expect people to listen to a prevention message or even consider not using? You know, we kind of skip to that. We skip right to the prevention, but we don't look at any of the indicators that lead them to use. And until we heal those issues, you know, this has been my mantra for a long time. It's not about the drugs. It's about all the things existing that make a person use drugs. And if we're just going to do little Band-Aids on top of things, I mean, yes, they help. The policies, the laws, the education, it all helps, but it's systemic. And if we don't heal the system, we don't heal the people, and people are just going to keep using because it helps them deal with their pain, or they perceive it to.
Yeah, exactly. Are you both, have you heard about the Rat Park study? This is like my favorite favorite
Tell us.
So this was a study that was done, I think in the 80s, around when sort of it was like the Just Say No, Nancy Reagan era, and sort of that thought that like if you use heroin one time, it's so addictive, you're hooked for life. And there were a lot of studies with rats that sort of showed like rats will starve themselves to death if you give them like a morphine solution. And so, you know, that applies to humans. So there was a researcher, and this work only came out in like the early 2000s because it was not, it didn't jive with sort of the party line. So it wasn't ever published, but they took lab rats and they built sort of like this dream lab rat land. And so they're very social creatures. So they put them together. They built like little trees and parks and had this huge space for them to run around. And then they repeated all of these like morphine in the water tests with rats to see like, would they actually give up if they had like a nice happy life and were with their rat buddies? Would they give all of that up to like switch over to use morphine? And what they found was they had to, in order to get the rats to drink the water with morphine, they had to put so much sugar in the water that they were actually just drinking it for the sugar solution. And then when they compared, what if we give just a sugar solution to like a morphine plus sugar solution, the rats still just went for the sugar. But the rats that were in like a lab rat condition where it was just like one per cage and all they got was like plain water or morphine water would drink the morphine water until they like stopped eating and died. And so that was sort of one of the first studies that was looking at like the importance of having like a community and being happy and social things to support you. And that it's not just sort of this like one time you use a substance and you throw everything away, that it's really about, everything is so interconnected. And if you have for you what is a good life and you have your needs met, like you're probably not going to fall into the same like addiction category, you know, as like someone who doesn't have those needs met.
I'm surprised. I never heard of that, but what an incredible study. And I mean, that it breaks it right down to what's important right there. It's that says it all. You know, there are certain things that we think of, we say, well, that's a no-brainer. But this, because we're exposed to this and we're in this field for that reason. But I mean, there was a Scandinavian country, I can't remember if it was Denmark or Norway, they put out a study that when they instituted after school programs for every child, substance misuse went down tremendously. Well, duh, you know, if people have a lot to do, I mean, we call it prime time for juvenile crime for a reason. I mean, kids after school who have nothing to do are going to find things to do sometimes that aren't positive. But if you give them positive alternatives and options, you're going to enrich their lives. They're going to make healthier choices. But I guess sometimes I just don't understand why people don't get that. Is it by choice, or is it because it's been ingrained into them?
I don't know, because prior to this work, I used to run after school programs, and we talked about the hours 3 to 6, which is the most important time of the day.
Right.
The most important, you know, and what the young people did, if their parents were at work, they were latchkey kids like myself, and they had to go home and figure it out. They had to figure it out. But a lot of them didn't. They either didn't have keys, or they had to stay outside and roam the streets, or they went home. Sometimes their home wasn't the best place to be. And we used to always argue, I used to take kids to City Hall and try to make sure that after school was still in place, because we had ways for young people to stay out of trouble, so to speak, to be a part of policy making. We talked about this earlier. We had student governments. We had young people doing rallies. These same young people that are rallying now for Black Lives Matter were the same people 10 years ago who were in after school programs, which end up being shut down. We have less and less after school programs for high schoolers and middle schoolers, and more for elementary age kids than ever, you know. And that's one of the things I would always talk about, is how after school program, how it benefits, how it, you know, after school, this is my opinion, would benefit for elementary age, it benefited the parent. For middle school age, it benefited the child and the parent because they both came together. And for high school, it benefited the child, because the adult, some adults would check out because now you're 16, you're 17, 18, now you're an adult. So having those things in place gives a child or a young person more success. When you remove that, then we have situations like we're talking about where we focus more on drug prevention. And that was, in my mind, like Ronni always told me, that was drug prevention. That was prevention that I was doing, that I didn't realize I was doing it then. You know, and then to take those things away, like Ronnie's saying, like you guys are saying, to take those things away, like what are we doing to our young people? What does that mean? What are we saying to our young people? What are we saying to society right now? Do we really care, or is it that we aren't able to make money off of it? Is that, you know, I apologize for getting political, but like, what does that say? You know, I'm going to stop.
No, don't stop. This is great. Keep it going, Chevar. You're brilliant. Keep it going.
I know. It's like I want to jump up and start, screaming, "Let's go!"
No, definitely. You know, and I see the young people that I worked with, and I was talking to a group earlier in one of my other meetings about the impact of the work I was in. Like, like Kaity said earlier about representation.
Mm-hmm.
And being probably the only, and I can say it, I can say the only person, the only black male in my field, in my organization at that time for many, many years, having parents come to me and say thank you, having young people, young men and women say thank you, and not fully understanding what that meant, because I was someone, because most of the teachers were white or women, and seeing someone that they had to look up to, seeing someone they aspired to be. Like, and I told Ronnie, is I have people, young people who are adults now, who are college students or out of college, who have families, full beards with children. Oh my God, Mr. Chevar. I have no clue who they are. I hope they aren't listening. I hope they are listening. I have no clue who they are, and them telling me thank you. Parents that, who find me on Facebook, I rarely go on Facebook, writing to me saying thank you for being impacted my child those 10 years ago, those 15 years ago. Like, being that person that they look up to. I used to design clothes. One of my students now, she has her own clothing line. I do photography. So my former students do photography, musicians, and all this stuff based off of conversations I had with them about their past and their future. Some of them are teachers, some of them are lawyers. It's because I was that beacon, that hope, that they saw someone who they saw as maybe an uncle or father figure. I even had, and I felt bad. I felt really bad. I even had one student say to me, "I'd rather you do my homework than my own dad," because I was caring to them.
Mm.
Being that tearing down that wall of what society says of a black man to be angry and I'm chill, homie. Let's rock out. Let's have fun. Let's do this math together. Let's learn these new words. Let's learn Spanish together. You teach me Spanish, I'll teach you English. Like, being that beacon. I know it's unfortunate that we remove those things from our young people. That the fact that, and I say this over and over, like, why do coalitions stop doing work during the summer? This is when we get in trouble the most. This is when the teens get in trouble the most. Oh my God. I remember as a teen, I used to write graffiti because it was late at night and I was bored. Basketball, the gyms were closed. So I'm going to go tag on buildings. That's what I did. I got in trouble. That was my crime. The statute of limitations is over. That was my crime.
Are you sure?
I hope.
I'm kidding.
That was my crime. So it's like, especially like Ronnie said earlier, like both guys said, like, we have this pandemic. I believe we missed out on a prime time of supporting our young people with, some youth employment stopping at the moment, with the baseball fields being closed, with the basketball courts being torn out, with the lack of jobs in general, with the schools being closed where there's no social interaction, where, watching my son on Zoom where all the kids have the cameras off, like, are they even paying attention? like, and young people seeing their Zoom fatigue. Like, how do we, rearrange that? How do we twist that up and say, let's use Zoom in a different way? Let's use, let's interact with young people in a different way. How do we social distance but still have social interaction?
Yeah. I'm going to back up for a second. You mentioned support. And,
Yes.
You hear me always talk about the 40 developmental assets.
Yes.
For me, that's my roadmap. One of the things, I used to run after school centers too in Nashville, Tennessee in the late 90s. I started with 4, and when I left, we had 13. And we were in inner city neighborhoods in Nashville. And we had somebody come from Vanderbilt University, and he did a study on us. And it was on resilience and social capital. And he proved without a doubt that when a young person has at least one caring adult in their lives, they will have a better chance to succeed, and it develops resiliency. And, I just pulled up for myself because I'm like, wait, I'm pretty sure the developmental assets list support. And that is one of the primary assets. Family support, other adult relationships, caring neighborhood, caring school climate, parental involvement in schooling. all of these things, when they exist in a young person's life, they help build resilience and they help them succeed. And, you know, again, these are things that are so simple, but are lacking today. And these, to me, are the best prevention measures of all. All our fancy wording and programs, they're great, but if these kids don't have that, it's really hard to get them to make those choices. You know, so just when you said that, a lot of my former students who I left in '97, and yes, there's one who's a grandmother, a young grandmother, but man, I was like, oh boy, they're incredible. These are the kids that people looked at and said, oh no, they're not going to make it. They've all made it. It took years for me to see that because I wasn't in touch with them. And, you know, prevention can be a thankless job. We put out all these efforts, all these campaigns, all these things we do, and we have no idea for another decade or more if they succeeded. The data might show some success, but we don't get the real picture until we run into these people and we find out, oh, something I said or did with you really did help, because they tell you. They tell you when it didn't too. But to see all of my former students and them saying to me, I'll never forget when you taught me this. You taught me about making positive decisions, and I would hear your voice when I'd be at a party. You know, so it's just, I'd say to all the prevention professionals out there, and that includes the people who are doing after school work and teachers and just providing what creates prevention as a whole, a more holistic view of it. Don't give up. What you're doing today may not pay off today, but it will eventually. You're planting seeds, and eventually when you plant seeds, those flowers are going to bloom. I mean, I have a patch out on my lawn that they dug up and he planted seeds, and it didn't grow for months and months, and all of a sudden I looked out there today and there was grass. So, you know, we can never give up. But, you know, this is why we do this work, because we believe that.
I do have a question for Kaity. You know, you talk about the support for LGBTQ plus individuals. Are there any resources or programs that you can mention that our listeners can to look for LGBT? Go for it if you can.
Yeah, so I think the first place to go, so the Unity Project, which is an initiative funded by the mayor's wife, Shirley McCrane, was started by her.
And this is New York City.
It's New York City, yes. So for New York City, I would say to look at go to unityproject.gov, I believe. So they have a whole list of resources of New York City providers for LGBTQ plus youth, broken down sort of by category, what services people can expect, and also how COVID-19's impacted those services. So what's remote, or what, you know, maybe you can't go to the same place. But in New York City, I mean, we have the center, we have HMI, which is the Hedrick Martin Institute. We have the Ali Forney Center. In Queens, there are some smaller organizations. There's the LGBT Network. There's the Queens Pride House. And I am blanking on a very big one in Queens that I can't remember their name right now. Nationally, you have the Trevor Project, which focuses a little more on suicide prevention. Itgetsbetter.org, I think, is another website.
Well, we could do a list of these, and we could, you know, post them on NYC Pop and on our respective Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Accounts. Sure. Yeah.
I can. You don't want me to just keep listing, maybe?
You can.
You can. I mean, what about? I mean, also, like, this thing about parents or even adults in general. How do you talk to a young person who may want to come out? You know, how do you address that? Because like there's a book that I read to one of my students. One of my staff said that they came out to them, and then I was, all right, you know, how do we support this young person? And there's a book, I think it's called it's a Crayon Color Red or something like that, where it talks about being different, and it's okay to be different. So, you know, like the student didn't, you know, share what I just read the book to the student, just so they felt comfortable that, you know, it's okay to be who you are. If the color of your crayon doesn't match the color of the label, it's okay.
Yeah.
You know, I wish like Ronnie said, I'll list the name of that book so we can have research. But what would a conversation look like with a young person? What advice you would give to an adult?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a group in New York, Canva, who does this. They have a program called Project Ally that's all about working with parents. And so I mean, I've spent a lot of time talking to them, and it's mixed, right? So you have parents who, it's easier if they're already kind of bought in and support LGBTQ issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think there are still inroads to be made for parents who have not, who don't understand, who are just like, my kid's not gay, or my kid's not trans, or why would they be? And I think it's tough because a lot of it is also our society, right? We're in a heterosexist society. So we assume everyone's straight. From the time someone's like a little kid, if it's a little boy, oh, you're going to have so many girlfriends, or reverse if it's a girl,
yes.
right? Like, oh, you aren't allowed to date, right? You're going to have so many boyfriends. And it's like, we need to break that, right? And that's a hard thing to do because it feels so natural, but that's the structure that really kind of sets up, this is the norm. And if you're outside of this, there's something wrong potentially.
One of my favorite films, and I never read the book, but I know about it, is something called Becoming Nicole. Are you familiar with that at all?
Mm-hmm.
There were twins who were born, they're the Maine twins, M-A-I-N-E, who happen to live in Maine. But it's the story of, they were born twin, I'm trying to remember. One of them realized that she was a girl. She was born and deemed a male, but then she realized that she was definitely female, and this is the story of how she became Nicole. But it chronicles the whole struggle with her parents. Her mother accepted her pretty much. Her father had a really hard time with it. And she's gone on to become somewhat of a media star. She's an actress. She's appeared in some of the superhero stuff, and her family really began to accept who she is. But it details the whole struggle. It's a beautiful, beautiful film, and a book. And I've read articles. Maybe because I lived in Maine, I got to see a lot of that. And she's just become a real activist. So I always tell people, if they can, to watch that, Becoming Nicole, because it really tugs at the heartstring. It kind of makes sense. Like, it allows parents to say, yeah, I'm having a hard time with this, but it's not my life. I have to honor my child. And that's eventually what happened with her father. Both parents came around to really supporting her. And look, it's still their child, and they're going to love her no matter what. And when they get to that point, they can accept. But it's just a really great story to take advantage of and look into. And the other thing I wanted to mention was, a few years ago, I did a workshop with John from the center at CATCA on, it was just an LGBTQ and prevention strategies, and not preventing being queer, but preventing using drugs at CATCA. And somebody used the word transitioning, and John corrected them. He said, no, they're not transitioning. They're becoming who they are. This person doesn't have to transition. They always knew. And it's funny how we select language that works for us, but doesn't necessarily work for them. And that brings me to just the other thing we had hoped to talk about a little bit about, was microaggressions. A lot of people don't realize what those are. And we talk about it a lot because that's part of, what we care about in our campaign. But if we had to explain to someone what a microaggression is there a simple way to explain it?
I mean, the way I don't have the definition in front of me, but it's sort of for me, it's the slip where your unconscious bias comes out. So kind of the like, oh, you're so articulate, or you're so well-spoken, or, kind of these little things that give away the stereotypes and assumptions you've made about someone based on their race or their outward appearance in some way.
Yeah, I mean, you described it better than the definition I have sitting in front of me, so, which is very formal. But a lot of times people don't realize they say those kind of things, like, can I touch your hair? No, or, well, you don't look gay. We see it a lot racially, and we see it across the board in a lot of different marginal cultures or roles where people have been pushed to marginalization. When I say marginal, not that I believe they are, I believe society pushed them to that area. I once had somebody say something to me about Jewing them down. when I was trying to order some supplies in Nashville, and one of my staff members said, well, go ahead, Ronni, you can Jew them down and get the best price. And I knew she didn't understand why that hurt me so much. So I explained to her why. I use it as a teaching moment because she really didn't mean it. But some microaggressions, I don't believe are that innocent. I believe that some people do mean it. Or somebody saying to someone who's trans, wow, you really look like a woman, you know. Or, you know, just saying to somebody, I've heard so many in my life. We just highlighted it in New York City Pop.
I don't see color.
I don't, oh, that's our favorite.
Yeah, that's my favorite. That's sarcasm. It's not
I know, I'm being facetious.
I love even the purple people. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
Right? Or LGBTQ, RST, you know. Yeah, you know, people don't realize the harm they do, and it creates so much trauma for people, and it creates a lot of stress, and it leads to so many other problems that could be physical, mental health issues. Just it creates something in a person that it just isn't fair. And I like to make people aware of it because sometimes people don't get it. That I don't see color one. I've heard so many people say that.
Me too.
and you're marginalizing somebody when you don't see color.
You don't see me if you don't see color.
Yeah.
Literally. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad we actually addressed in the NYC Pop microaggressions. I wish we could do more around that, whether it's sharing some video or sharing more literature. Because people sometimes, like you guys said, don't necessarily know that they're participating in. By saying, oh, you're one of the smart ones. Like, smart one of what? like, you know, like, you might, like, this is the one, oh my God, I hate it. You must have Indian in you. What the hell does that mean? Like, that's something I used to, like, what does that mean?
I don't know what that means. I'm a white person. I can't give you on that. I don't know.
Like I'm like, there's certain things that, you know, you would hear growing up that, you know, people don't know that it's triggering, and you just like, you shrug it off. Like, you just like a dust off your shoulder, where it's like, why does it bother you? And like Ronni said, like, sometimes you have to address it. And say it bothers you because of this. And it's like, well, I didn't mean harm by it. You didn't, but it was harmful. Mm-hmm. Like, just be aware when you say things, they're harmful. Just to keep in mind when people say things to you, and I tell it to my friends all the time, when someone says something to you, how do you react? If you get upset when someone says something to you, be mindful of when you say something to someone else. Like, don't get mad if someone says, oh, blah, blah, blah. Don't get mad about it. Like, you know, don't get mad because now it affects who you are. Like, you should be mad all the time because it affects who that person is, or the person next to them, or the individual behind that person. It affects them, you know. And I'm not saying don't speak your mind. Be who you are. Be your truth. But just be mindful of how it affects people around you. You know, and how they may react to you. They might say, I don't like this person. And you might not know why they don't like you. Because you say racist things. Because you say really hurtful things. You say mean things about a certain group that you know, even though I might not be a part of that group, it still affects me because you might be saying it about my group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I want to know if I say something that offends somebody, because I may be doing it out of ignorance or habit, and I need to know because I need to change that behavior. You know, I've heard people say things like, that's so gay. What does that mean? What does that mean? You know, that's so gay, or who? I've actually heard this. I've been asked this. So who's the guy in your relationship? Nobody. We're two women. You know.
Like, I mean, even with me, I love wearing colors. I love wearing pink and purple. I'm from Harlem, so that's what we wear. You know, people, you know, equating, you know, the color pink with either someone being gay or female color. I'm like, this is a color. It looks good on me. I like pink. I like purple. Purple is my favorite color. Color of royalty. So, like, you know, getting rid of those stigmas, you know, of identifying certain things. If someone likes black or orange or purple or green or tomatoes over okra or vice versa, let them like it. Let them enjoy it. You know, that's who they are. That's what makes that person an individual. That's what makes that person different. Like, we might be the same because we're human. That's it. That's all we have in common. Or we have hair, but we have different texture here. We have different colors of hair. We come in different shapes and sizes, and the fact that we don't accept that, and I'm sometimes I'm victim to that too, where I might say things and then I'll catch myself, and I'm always asked, hey, did I offend you? Please tell me, because I don't know.
I mean, we're all human, right?
Yeah,
so we
absolutely.
all we all have those moments where you're like, I just stepped in it, didn't I? Let me back up. Not do that again. Yeah.
And we shouldn't get upset if the person says, I want to learn. Don't tell them. If a person acknowledges their mistake, help them. Don't like, oh, you said it, now I hate you. Now then you just became that person that you hated. You're continuing that cycle. Like if I come to you and say, I made a mistake. I wasn't aware of what I was saying. I made a joke that was hurtful. How can I make things better? I'll do my best not to make those jokes, whether I'm in your presence or not in your presence. How can I support? And if someone says that, I would hope people say, you know what, you're right, let me help you, and accept that. But people, there's like we said this word about 20 times already, trauma. People have trauma. So it's easier said than done to let those things go. So it's how do we deal with that trauma? How do we identify, like, what, there's trauma within me where I can't let that go? And how do you, support yourself, or how do you get the help for yourself?
Yeah. And I feel like for me, this is the ultimate environmental change, right? And so especially working with LGBTQ youth and LGBTQ youth of color, I don't work with them, but trying to support community coalitions, it's about that change, right? So how do we get people to recognize the microaggressions we're committing that contribute to trauma, that make you say, like, I just can't deal with this. I'm gonna, like, when I'm 14, just get high so I don't have to think about all of the things everyone said to me, and to just kind of numb that pain, right? So if for me, that's very much what prevention work is trying to make an environment around people and places for young people to feel safe and accepted and like they have self-worth, and to develop into the people they'll become. And then you can make your choices. Then we can like talk about things when you're an adult, but it shouldn't start so staggered and with such disparities. It's my dream. It's my like.
But at least you're working on that dream, and I think we all are. And we could do a part 2 about this. This stuff is just so important. But we are putting up a lot of these resources on our link tree, and if anybody listening wants to, just please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and you'll be able to have access to that. Now I'm going to ask, I always like to end with a fun question. I'll ask what I asked the last time because I learned so much. And we'll give you a minute to think.
Okay.
What did you want to be when you were growing up?
Oh, I had a lot. I was going to be an
Let's
artist or a ballerina or a marine biologist. Then I went through a phase where I was going to work on tall ships.
Wow.
And be a bellhop.
Nice.
Okay.
Well, I shared this before, but I wanted to be a veterinarian, but I wasn't very good in science. So that went out the window. And I wanted to be a famous singer and songwriter. I'm not giving up on that dream as yet. I'm still working on that one. But I remember in my junior year of high school, I took economics. And that is what won me over to wanting to work with people and working with populations that were not so fortunate in terms of what they received socioeconomically, and just working with young people who had a lot of cards stacked against them to help them find a better path. And that came out of, I had a teacher, he wasn't a doctor then, Mr. Lerner. And this is a long time ago. I graduated high school I graduated in '69. And he was the one who turned it around for me when I learned about poverty. And I learned about what people deal with in poverty. And it just made me, first I wanted to be a social worker, but then I kind of moved towards what I'm doing now.
When I was 7, I wanted to be a NASCAR driver because I like cars and they went fast and they drove in circles. And I also wanted to be a firefighter. And then when I got older, I realized fire was hot. So I didn't want to. And NASCAR wasn't a dream. The dream faded because I live in the city and it wasn't accessible. It wasn't something that I can gravitate towards rather. I wanted to be a doctor at one point when I first day in college, I went and I realized how many classes I had to take. And I was like, it's like, I got to do a lab. I got to do a 3-hour lab and get no credit for this. But, you know, I mean, other things like Ronnie, I want to be a musician, you know. I had a clothing line. I had a, Katie, I love art. I wanted to be an artist. So I took my art to clothing design, and I still, you know, do art, but more in photography. So I'm still following my path to art, but not the initial in a gallery, museum, big Picasso painting, you know, Basquiat. I have my thoughts on Basquiat, but that's for a different show.
I want to hear that show. With the Basquiat special edition.
Let's do it.
Maybe you'll be a guest on that one too then.
But my major, art history. I'm like, yeah.
Oh, was it really? My major was English.
Nice.
You know, it's funny how we have different backgrounds than what we go into, but we apply some of those talents, and I think that's what it's all about. Nothing is in a box if you don't let it be. You can take what you learn and you can apply it anywhere. But we want to thank you for joining us today. I can't believe it went so fast.
This is great. Thank you all.
Yeah, you showed a lot of really important stuff, and we love working with you. So thank you again for joining us. And this is the solution. Nothing changes if we change nothing. And I'll catch you next time. Stay safe, everybody. We got a storm coming. All right, take care.